Getting a government job in India is more from a security standpoint rather than the payment standpoint. Different situations will lead the people to follow different practices, and this is not just the traditional approach that we are going to see. We are trying to look for the right app for the right kind of work. Good morning and welcome to the first session of Unit 1 in Organizational Behavior, 4th semester B.B.A, and we are going to today talk about the introduction on the Unit 1 of Organization Behavior. This is going to be a very interesting session where we are going to learn about the fundamental concepts, the definition of what exactly organizational behavior means to you. So moving forward, let's first get ourselves introduced to this wonderful subject called as organization behavior. Now, an organization is an organized body of people with a particular purpose, and the people themselves are regarded as the most important organizational asset. So when we talk about an organization, the first thing that comes to the mind is people. Can you imagine an organization without people? The answer might be an yes. I'm not denying it. But then the truth remains that the biggest asset that an organization can ever create is its people. Without people, organization is a lifeless soul altogether. So people are regarded to be the biggest asset of the organization. They are the empowerment of the organization. They are the life and blood of the organization. And when you look into the organization, they've been created for a particular purpose. You don't just create an organization because you wanted to do business. You don't just create an organization that because some of your friends told you or it just came up in the top of your dreams. You create an organization because you had a purpose. You had a definitive outlook. You wanted to create this organization because you had a definitive aim and ambition. So that's why I always say organization comes with a definitive purpose. It has a particular purpose for its existence in this world. So we need to understand that factor and we need to grow the people with that purpose in mind. Followed by organization behavior studies how interaction occurs between people and in a work setting altogether. Now, for example, when you work in an organization, it might be any company, it might be a Google or an Apple or a Microsoft, or when we are talking about an Indian company or a Chinese company or a Singaporean company, whichever company are you working for? The first thing that a person would look into an organization is how well are we set? Are we in tandem with the organization? Because I like to work in 10 different companies. My ambition is to work with Tesla. My ambition is to work with Microsoft or with Google or with Yahoo or with Apple or with Nike, any of the companies in this world. But then when I join the organization, how comfortable am I with the organization? Is the organization creating a platform for me through which I would be enabled to work better? Will my performance be affected or will my performance go up the next league? So that's where organization comes into picture. It needs to make the employee get into a comfortable position where the organization and the employee come together on the same track. So that's why I always say that organization behavior will typically try to study about the interaction. How well do you gel with the organization? The next thing, this will enable the managers to improve the job satisfaction. Let me just underline that word for you, and stimulate innovation and creativity, thus creating a dynamic workplace. But let's first try to understand these words. Now, first thing is the word called as job satisfaction. Many a times people ask you this question, are you really satisfied in your life? Are you really happy about the job what you are doing? Are you really satisfied with the kind of role that you are performing? The answer to it many a times is no. Why? Because we are doing a job many a times just because out of compulsion, out of force, or out of the factor that we just have to earn money. But the day when you start realizing that a job is giving you satisfaction, a job is making you feel happy about what you are doing, how you are involving yourself, then we start talking about the job satisfaction. That's a very, very important parameter when it comes to the organizational behavior altogether. Why? Because when you are a part of the organization, is the organization giving you enough role, enough parameters in terms of making you feel satisfied, in terms of making you feel good about the job? Because then you will be a part of the system which will go on, innovate and create. Now, when you look at organizations like Google or Apple or Nike or Tesla or any of the modern organizations that we are talking about, including Facebook, including Twitter, or when we talk about organizations like Paytm, what is the one thing that they look out of the employee is the creativity, the innovation. They don't want you to be an employee who will just log in for 8 or 9 hours on the job and just keep on moving further. They want an employee who can bring into the place the dynamics of innovation. They want an employee who can create magic at the work environment. They want an employee who can really take the organization to the next level with the help of his creativity. So definitely, when you are satisfied with the role that you are playing in the organization, creativity is literally sky limit. So it just goes up. This is a very, very important factor that we need to understand when it comes to the organizational behavior. Now, moving further, the definition of an organization. There are 3 aspects which I would like to talk here in terms of the definition of an organization. The first one, let me start with the social inventions. It is basically referring to the gathering of people that make up an organization. You walk into any company today, you see hundreds of thousands of people who are working with their systems, with their handheld laptops, palm tops, or probably tabs, and so many other gadgets that we can think about. What are they doing? Why there are so many people huddled together in one common place? What are they up to? Now, we know that that's an organization, that's a company, they are working for some particular purpose. But apparently, let's try to understand the work front or the work area is the biggest socialization factor that one has to understand and accept. Because when you go to the work area, that is the place where you spend the maximum number of time away from your family. So when you spend about 8 to 10 hours a day working in an organization, you need the organization to be flexible. You need the organization to be social in nature. You cannot see the organization as a rigid factor. You cannot see the organization bound. So you cannot see the organization as an entity that is just going to encapsulate people and hold them tight. So organization is the first important place where you will be able to see that people are interacting with each other. It's creating a social environment altogether, followed by accomplishing the goals. Now, the primary goal of the organization is money, yet interrelated with other goals such as personal goals of an individual and so many other efforts altogether. Now, the primary aim of any organization, we know it, and we are definitely in for it, and that factor is called as money. You cannot go back and say that, sir, I run an organization for charity. Well, that is a different definition, different parameter altogether. My primary aim or ambition in this world is definitely money. But then the money is not made by a single person, not by an individual. It's a collective effort of hundreds and thousands of people who put in their efforts day in and day out so that the organization makes money. So organization is a collective process. That's where I really want to emphasize in this class, that organization is not going to be a process. It's not going to be an isolated area altogether. It is going to be the area where you are going to see people coming forward, doing something really better for the organization. So that's definitely what I would say, is that it's a collective effort altogether. The third factor which I would definitely like to talk about, the word called as the group effort altogether. It's a collection, so the teamwork always matters when it comes to the organization behavior altogether. Why is that word teamwork now suddenly coming up? So where is this teamwork popping up so hard? Why is it so important today? Look into an organization where you see people who are working day in and day out, trying to do something. But without their collective effort, without their collective hand altogether, you will not be able to see results. So definitely the factor that they overcome the limitations and work together as a team forms a very, very important aspect when it comes to the organization behavior. Now, moving further, the importance of organizational behavior, the first thing which I would like to say is developing the interpersonal skills. Everybody in this world loves to communicate. Everybody in this world loves to be analytical. He loves to go further, talk to people, learn, and then start developing. But then what happens in the organizational behavior aspect is that many people at some stage, at some point, become reluctant and they don't want to grow. So that's where organization behavior comes in as a modification. It tries to tell people very, very clearly about this factor, that you need to start interacting. You need to start unlearning, relearning, and again start developing yourself. You cannot be a person of an isolated wonder altogether. You cannot be that. Because organization behavior itself is a very, very important, it's a very, very complicated, wounded factor that, it tries to encompass everybody. It wants everybody to be a part of the system, interact, learn, analyze, and go further. So you cannot spin out of the web. You cannot be a person who's like an isolated island, or you cannot be a person who does not even want to be a part of the system. So this is where the interpersonal skills and organization behaviors link comes into picture. It tells that until and unless you start talking with people, you start learning from people, you start telling the people what exactly that needs to be done, then only you will be able to make a successive effort in terms of building up the organization. So definitely the abilities of decision making, analytical skills, leading, motivating, all these factors come purely because of the organizational behavior capacities. Now, when we talk about the importance, I would also like to talk about the personal development understanding. Why this is very, very important. What is that personal development? Why? Because until now, we have been only talking about team organization. We've always been very, very particular about the word we. We always say that inside the organization, we call ourselves as we. We are all one team, one family. So that word is so relevant here. But all of a sudden, I see that, so now you are speaking about I, one individual. But definitely that I is important. Why? Because inside the organization, this letter called as I is of a very, very great importance. Personally, I would like to understand and I would like to mention upon this factor, is the organization providing me a path, a pavement for development? If the answer is yes, now if you go forward and tell that yes, the organization is definitely going to pave a path for your development, for your growth, for your, the way of taking your career forward, then definitely I am in with the organization. So what I mean by saying is that individual development of self-enhancement, of giving him the position, the power, the empowerment of doing better decision making is definitely going to play a big role in the organization. And who enables it? None other than the organizational behavior. So when you study this subject, you also start understanding how an individual becomes important in the organization, followed by understanding others will also assist the managers. Why? Because the manager has to understand each and every individual separately, make him understand this factor that why things are happening in such a manner, how individuals behave, how they interact, how they go forward and react to the situations. All those things have to be noted, have to be understood, and then only the outcome can be a success. Followed by the evolution of organizational behavior. Though we are going to talk about the evolution, the historical development in a much more detailed manner in the coming session. But then we are also going to understand about the base level evolution, where I'm going to talk about the Hawthorne studies that was developed by Frederick Winslow Taylor in the beginning of the 20th century. And this approach was assumed that the employees are motivated largely by money, importance of giving monetary incentives to be sufficient to the workers, all the factors of the Marx bureaucratic ideology, all these things we are going to see in detail. But then I would just like to say that every subject having an historical background, definitely organizational behavior also started way back in the 20th century. And the source for this was none other than motivation. So if you understand the concept of motivation, how to keep your workers motivated till the last is what we are talking about in organization behavior. So as rightly pointed out by Winslow Taylor, or when you talk about Max Weber, or when you talk about any great management thinkers who have been there in the 20th century, they've always tried to understand the psychology of the employee towards the organization. Now, when you start looking into it, most of the evolution has always tried to work on the organizational structure, the division of labors. We have also talked about the laws and orders. The studies has also brought out number of findings relevant to the understanding of human behavior at work. This approach is emphasized on the influence of social factors, the group of individual behavior, and this approach also helps us to usher in more humanity-centric approach. Now, most of the management thinkers who have gone with the model of understanding the organization behavior, if you go back in terms of understanding the concept bit, you will be able to see that most of these people have tried to understand the nature of human beings, the scope of work, the organizational factors, how the organization is divided, what are the hierarchies, what are the do's and don'ts, and how the organization pattern needs to be understood as a system altogether. So this approach is more about the human-centric approach. It has always been trying to understand as human being, as an intellectual part of it, and how important he is in terms of playing this role, in terms of making understand how the organization factor works. Now, the models of the organization behavior. Now, this is a very, very important and an interesting concept where we're going to see different kinds of supports altogether. We're going to start with the models of the autocratic, the custodial, the supportive, the collegial, and the system-oriented. So these are some of the systems that we are going to talk about altogether. So when I talk about these kind of things, I would also like to talk here some of the most important factors like the autocratic model starting with. Now, let's go with the autocratic model here. This model depends on an employee who does not follow the orders will be penalized. Now let's get on to that word very, very clearly. What is paramount for the employee is obedience to the boss and not a respect for a manager. Now please understand these words very, very clearly. What we are trying to understand here, what we are trying to undo or redo here is that I want only a one-way communication. The boss is always right. So I always write down for the autocratic model, the boss is always right. That is what we mean by saying in terms of the autocratic model. If you have understood the meaning of this model, so the boss says, if you have to do this work at this time, at this particular hour, you just have to do it. So I am going to count on you on your levels of obedience and not on your thinking or your intellectual factors. You are just going to follow the rules. So obedience is of paramount importance for you. Now the boss pays minimum wages because minimum performance is given by the employees. As a result, some employees give higher performance because of the internal achievement drivers. That's because personally I like the boss and the boss is natural born leader or other factors. Now why I emphasize on these things is that when you look into this model, this is quite a model that has been followed in many organizations across the world. And they are not wrong or they are not completely out of the system altogether. But what you need to understand here is the performance level in this organization will definitely come down. Why? Because the employees are not allowed to think freely. The employees are not being given emphasis or importance in terms of bringing out your natural ideas, your opinions, and your thought process. So what happens in an autocratic model is that the boss has to get accepted whether you like it or not. Whatever the boss says has to be followed. Now, there are few people in the organization who might feel that by default, by nature, by understanding, by acceptance, that the boss is the only person, he is the godfather. So I would like to work for him. I have got no opinions. I have got no restrictions. So I'll continue to deliver whatever that has been told. But when you look at the majority of the system, 90% of the system, they would not perform well. Why? Because the boss is paying minimum. So there is no monetary appraisal here. And secondly, I am working under force, under compulsion, under a tight water component system altogether. So I will not be able to perform as expected, as going forward altogether. So this is why I would say that the autocratic model is not really a great model to follow in terms of organization behavior. Now, the next one, the custodial model, where the economic resources are focused towards this approach on money to pay wages and benefits. Since the employee's physical needs are already reasonably met, the employer looks for security needs as motivating force. If the organization does not have the wealth to provide pensions and pay other benefits, it cannot follow this model. Let's go back to our governmental organizations in India. We always feel that getting a government job in India is more from a security standpoint rather than the payment standpoint. All of us know that the salary that is provided by a governmental organization cannot match to the top-notch MNC companies. What salary is being paid to a government bank CEO might not even equal, it might be way lesser than the salary that is driven or that is got by a CEO in a private multinational bank. But still, people prefer to be a part of the government organizations. Why? Because the organization tries to drive you towards the security concept. They know that you are going to get a reasonable, handsome salary, which is definitely going to take care of your family and your needs. So that part is already taken care. You don't have to worry about it. You're going to be placed in some rank or order and you're going to be paid some salary. So that's never going to be a question. The question is going to be, how long will I be in that job? So when you come to the governmental organization, you will be in the job as long as you retire, unless and until if something untowards happen or you tend to do something which is illegal to the entire system. So what does a government job promise you is a lifelong security that as long as you are there, you will continue to be a part of the organization without further questioning. Now there, the question that an employee might ask or that might come to the top of the mind is the word called performance. So will my performance be valued? What if I am a person who likes to run the extra mile? Will I be recognized? What if I am a kind of person who likes an innovative character? What if I try to believe in bringing in changes to the organization? The answer is no. Why? Because the custodial model clearly says that I am only worried about giving you a job and the payment for the job. I am not worried about your intellectual thought process. I don't want to be a part of it. I only want to drive home the factor that you are a part of the system and you will continue to be a part of the system as long as the laws of the land permit. So this is typically a custodian model where the employee gets completely satisfied. He completely starts accepting what it is and he doesn't have to push beyond the limits to achieve something great. So this is a model which is a very, a simplistic model that locks the employee into the shell and he just remains there as long as the law and as the system permits. Now, the supportive model, instead of power, the supportive model depends on leadership money. Though leadership management provides climate to help employees to grow and accomplish in the interest of the organization the things that they are capable, employees will take responsibility, develop, drive to contribute, improve themselves if the management gives them a chance. Management orientation is therefore a support for the job performance to happen and rather than, just paying them the money. Now, this is a model which is slightly better than the custodian model. Why do we say that? In the custodian, it's all about just security. But in the supportive model, you are going to enable the employee by giving him a platform, by giving him a chance, by giving him a situation where he can perform better. So if the employee feels that yes, I can take up this job and I can deliver it with all the odds, with all the risk in the mind, then automatically the management is ready to give him a chance. This is where the management supports the employee in terms of achieving the organizational goals. So you are now creating a platform. You are trying to enable the employee by saying that, yes, we are ready to provide you opportunity to grow. So this is where the supportive factor comes. You are going to be paid. You are going to be given all the benefits. Plus, you are also going to be given an opportunity to perform, which is yet a very, very big step taken up by the organization. Now, the next one, the collegial model. Now, why do I say the word collegial model? Is college so fun? Is it so a place where, just people come and socialize and go? The answer is definitely a yes to a very large extent. But let me just tell you, college does not mean just fun alone. But college also means that it is a place of learning together. It is a place where you will come across different dynamics altogether. So the collegial model is more about the management building and feeling of people working together, partnership altogether. Let me just share an example with you. Most of the consulting companies, when I talk about Deloitte and Touche, or when I talk about companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers, Ernst & Young, KPMG, the big four in auditing, these are all people who work on partnership and especially on the collegial model. Now, how does they work? They typically believe that every single person who joins their organization, the consulting firm, all together. They put their hands together and everybody gets a part of the work to be delivered, and everybody will try to work together and create a successive model. Now, what will happen here is that there is nobody called as apparently a boss. There is nobody called as a hard and fast rule manager there. What is there is how far you can go further, take up the levels of responsibility, deliver to the next level as far as possible. That makes you a leader. So what they typically look here is the contribution rather than the hierarchy. So the word contribution and contributors matter a lot. As a result, the employee's response, automatically the responsibility goes up, he takes up more initiative and they are able to perform better. Now, the psychological result of a collegial model is employee is self-discipline. Now, this is a very, very important factor that we have to understand when it comes to organizational behavior. Most of the organizations never try to go forward or reprimand their employees by saying that you have to be like this, you have to be that. But then, there are few organizations in the world which train their employees to become self-disciplined, self-motivated altogether. They want the employees to take the pride of working there and gain experience out of it. So that's why we always say that the concept of self-discipline really matters a lot, because that can make the person get along to the situation, get along to the growth further and in a faster manner. Employees usually feel a degree of fulfillment coming into picture while the worthwhile contribution and self-actualization. So this is where it really matters a lot. Why? Because if you come and if you start understanding yourself and then start working all together, then probably, yes, you will be able to actually analyze, do things better and take it forward to the next level as far as possible. So that is why we say that this kind of model is definitely a superlative model of working. Now, the system model. Since the employees are being asked to spend hours of day at work and they want to work at a context which is ethical, infused with integrity and trust, and they will be able to provide an opportunity to the experience of growing sense of community among the co-workers. Now, what happens here is that they try to put into a system, a model where you have to work without being the factor that this is how we have to be towards the customer, a particular sense of behavior, being sensitive to your customers, taking care of their needs, understanding the diverse workforce, rapidly able to address and change yourself to the needs of the organization. So therefore, you'll see that the employees go beyond the self-discipline of the collegial model until they reach a state of self-motivation, which they take the responsibilities of their own goals and action. Probably yet another step in terms of organization behavior, where you become really dynamic, where you become enthusiastic about what you do inside the organization. You set your own goals, you set your own ideas, you set your own pace, and you start moving further with all due diligence and the model set in position. So that's why the system model is definitely a very, very strong approach. Followed by the mutual interest. The mutual interest provides a superordinate goal. This is very, very important. Why? Because today in organization, the relationships between employees have to be looked forward very, very clearly. The integrated efforts of the individuals and the organization have to be collected. They have to be mutually respected. Their strategies, their negotiations, all have to be on the same page. They have to reach a consensus in whatever they are doing, so that will help them to reach the respective goals. Now, similarly, individuals who have the shared mutual interest are likely to make their organization strongest, because collection of same idea, collection of individuals put together will lead to unity, will lead to synchronization of goal, will lead to visualization of better ideas, and definitely the organization will be able to perform better. Now, the human resource approach. This approach is concerned with the growth and development of people towards higher levels of competency. So you always believe that this is not the level at which you can perform, you can still do better. Now that is what we always get as an advice from our seniors, from our boss, or from any other person who really cares about our development. So whenever people say this, this is where the human resource approach comes, where they try to put you across in terms of motivating you, taking you to the next level as far as possible. This approach helps the employees becomes better in terms of work, in terms of responsibility, and subsequently tries to create a climate in which they can contribute to the best of their improved facilities altogether. So this is how it becomes a very, very important factor altogether in terms of growth, in terms of the mutual model altogether. So this is very, very important for all of us, where we can start seeing that the growth is happening and things are moving at a rapid speed or a pace altogether. Followed by the contingency approach. Now in this, if you start seeing that different situations will lead the people to follow different practices, and this is not just the traditional approach that we are going to see. So each situation must be analyzed carefully to determine significant variable that is there to establish to effective practices. Now, every time an employee might not be going through the same kind of scenario in his work area. So there might be changes in the atmosphere. There might be changes in terms of his working pattern. He might have to take hard and fast decisions. He might have to be flexible. Sometimes he has to be lenient. Sometimes he has to put his foot strong, saying that, no, I don't want to do it. So when you are going through the different situations of life, the contingency approach makes you understand the factor very, very clearly that organizational behavior is the most dynamic form of working, and this is not something just where you will just take forward things and go forward. This is something where you have to understand, you have to analyze, and you have to take it forward. So this is a very, very important concept altogether. Now, productivity is considered to be improved as an output that can be produced. Why? Because in the form, the input might remain the same. The working hours might be the same. The system might be the same. You are limited to the same kind of organization. But then what will be highly improvised is that you will be able to see better output. You will be able to see a better growth model altogether. So that's why we say that the economic level of output really matters, and this is how the organization will grow further. Now, the systems approach will also talk about this. Why? Because in this, you would start seeing that the emphasis being between people and technology, exactly a situation that we are going through right now. The moment people talk about work from home with the current pandemic situation, the dependence is on people and technology. They are not going to attend the office. They are going to stay back at home, and they are going to use the technology that is available, that is provided to them, and deliver the result for the organization to function effectively. Which means the approach also emphasizes on the interaction between organization and a broader environment of social, economic, political, cultural, from wherever they operate, because this is becoming really, really important to the modern context today. When you start working from the home, you are not in the same atmosphere. You are not in the same kind of situation that we are talking about today. You are surrounded by different aspects. You have your family around you. You have a lot of disturbances. You have a lot of people coming around. There are a lot of people looking at you as what you are doing. You are being surrounded by different gadgets, different environment altogether, but still the organizational goals are not going to change. Your dependency on technology is definitely going to be high, but at the same time, you cannot compromise on the productivity. Now, The two ways dependent is that dependent on environment to provide the input, dependent on the environment to accept the output. So one side, when the organization gives you work, they also understand what kind of situation you are going through. And the organization also makes itself ready to accept the output that is going to come out from the individual. So now you understand the combination, the acceptance of input versus output really matters a lot when we are going to look into the factor called as work from home approach. Now, the interdisciplinary approach, now this approach advocates the efficiency that the right methods to get the job done through specialization on the job by planning and scheduling, by using standard operating mechanism, establishing standard time to do the job, by proper selection, training of personnel and the different factors. Now, what do we understand in interdisciplinary is that the right person for the right kind of job. With the advent of apps coming into our mobile phone, where our phones are loaded with n number of apps, n number of passwords and logins all together. Now, what has happened in the world of app is that everybody starts looking out for the right app for the right kind of job. Now, for example, let's say, look at the app called as Cred. Cred is typically a financial app which will help you to track your payments regarding your credit cards, your debit cards, or probably any other EMIs or your financial commitments. Now, you will be able to use Cred only for a financial purpose and not for playing games. On the other side, when you have an application like Zomato, the application is being used by people for ordering food. Now, when you look into an application like Google Pay, it is again used to do some financial transaction. When you look into an application like ICICI Securities, that is typically used for your demat or your account trading purpose. Now, what am I trying to come here is that we are trying to look for the right app for the right kind of work. So every work has got a right approach, a right methodology, and it is used only for that purpose. That is where when you start seeing the operating mechanism, when you start understanding the situation correctly, automatically the output also gets completely worked up. Now, followed by the globalization and diversification which is happening. The multinational operations of business add new dimensions to the organization and behavior as it is stepping into a different social outlook world, political and economic environments, the social, political, cultural world altogether. So what you are able to see here is that MNCs are experiencing a wave of change, a sea of change. Why? Because they are now going to start accepting people from different community, different caste, different creed altogether. They are not going to be an organization which is going to have a monotonous set of people, but they're going to involve the word called diversity to a very large extent altogether. So, moment that diversity starts stepping into organization, the belief, the approach, the methodology, the way of the work environment is also going to change. With all those factors coming into picture, definitely organizational behavior is going to be a most important tool that is going to bring in a different dimension to your workplace altogether. With this, I come to the conclusion of today's session. I hope and believe that in this session, there has been a lot of resources that have been presented to you, which would be of great help and resource to you. In the upcoming session, we are going to talk about the historical development of organizational behavior. Until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.